The storm rolled in with a fury, rain pelting the windows and wind howling through the dense trees that surrounded the isolated lake house. 12-year-old Ben was thrilled. Nothing made him feel more alive than a storm. His parents had gone to a weekend wedding, trusting him to hold down the fort for the first time ever. He planned a marathon of horror movies, snacks, and gaming on the living room's massive TV. Thunder boomed as Ben leaned back on the couch, controller in hand, eyes glued to the screen. The storm outside only added to the immersion, flashes of lightning reflecting off the glass. The remote cabin was a summer escape, never meant for winter storms, but the heavy, warm air of a summer tempest rattled the walls with brutal force. A loud thud interrupted the digital carnage. Ben's head snapped toward the sliding glass door that overlooked the back deck. His pulse quickened, but he relaxed when he saw nothing but rainwater streaming down the glass, probably just a branch from the oak tree. He chuckled and resumed his game. Then came the knock. Slow, measured, heavy. Ben froze the front door. He glanced at the clock. It was past 10 p.m. Panic trickled in, but he clung to rationality. Maybe a lost hiker or a neighbor. But the nearest cabin was miles away, and it was pouring. No way anyone would be out in this. Ignoring the knock felt wrong. His parents always said to trust his instincts. He crept to the door, standing on tiptoe to peer through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, rain-slicked hair clinging to a gaunt, unshaven face. He wore a filthy raincoat, one sleeve torn, revealing an arm smeared with dirt or something darker. His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ben's breath caught. The man's knuckles rapped against the wood again, 2 deliberate taps. "Hey, kid," the man called. "Phone's dead. Car broke down. Can you let me use yours?" Every survival instinct Ben had screamed not to respond, but he felt rooted in place. The man's head tilted, eyes squinting at the peephole. "Come on, buddy. It's pouring out here." Thunder cracked and Ben flinched. He knew he had to say something, anything. I can call for you." The man's smile widened. "I'd feel better coming in." "And no," Ben stammered. "I'll call from here." The man's face twitched and the polite facade melted away. He leaned closer. "Open the door, kid." A harsh scraping noise jerked Ben's attention to the sliding glass door, where a second man stood, face obscured by a hood. He clutched something long and metal, a crowbar. The man on the porch pounded on the door, snarling. "Open up now." Ben's blood ran cold. He sprinted for the garage, locking the door behind him. He reached for the emergency button to open the overhead door, but his hand trembled so much he missed the switch twice. The door groaned as it rolled open, the noise deafening in the storm. He ducked under and bolted into the rain, feet pounding mud as he ran toward the dark tree line. Glancing back, he saw shadows moving in the garage, but he didn't slow down. Branches tore at his skin, thunder crashed overhead, and rain soaked him to the bone. Hours later, drenched and shivering, Ben stumbled into the clearing where Mr. Grady's cabin stood. Light seeped through drawn curtains. He banged on the door until it flew open, revealing the old man clutching a shotgun. Ben collapsed into his arms, babbling incoherently. The police arrived soon after, finding the cabin ransacked. Furniture overturned, knives missing from the block, but no sign of the men. Ben never stayed in the cabin alone again. Years later, he heard about the drifters who preyed on remote cabins, testing doors and windows during storms. Always hopping for a kid home alone, too scared to call for help. He never answered knocks in the night again. I never imagined my life would be marked by terror, much less the kind of dread that lingers in the bones long after the storm has passed. Growing up in the quiet outskirts of Maplewood, a sleepy town nestled against dense, whispering woods, my life was defined by routine and predictability. The sort of place where people nod as they pass by, and the loudest thing on a Saturday night is the hum of cicadas. That night the air was heavy and oppressive, pregnant with the threat of rain. My grandparents' old farmhouse creaked and groaned as the wind picked up, rattling the warped wooden shutters. The house had been in the family for generations, passed down like a family heirloom, and showed every year of its age. My mother had always been superstitious about storms, saying they carried the voices of the dead, warnings meant to be heeded. I used to laugh it off, but as the first low rumble of thunder echoed through the valley, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. It was past 3 in the morning when the storm truly unleashed itself. Rain lashed the windows, and the wind howled like a grieving widow. My mother, grandfather, and grandmother were all asleep, dead to the world despite the chaos outside. I sat up in bed, my face lit only by the pale glow of my phone screen as I scrolled through social media, numbing myself to the cacophony outside. The power flickered and then died with a faint pop, leaving me in darkness. I cursed under my breath, the sudden stillness amplifying the rain's savage drumming. The air was stifling, and the silence, aside from the storm, felt unnatural. I grabbed my phone, activating the flashlight as a cold draft washed over me. I shivered, pulling on an old sweatshirt before deciding to head to the kitchen for water. The hallway was pitch black, shadows dancing where the phone's beam failed to reach. The old wood groaned under my weight, and I could almost hear my mother's voice scolding me to tread lightly. As I neared the kitchen, a sudden blast of cold air struck me, sharp enough to make my teeth chatter. The back door stood slightly ajar, rain spraying in and pooling on the floor. My pulse quickened. We always locked up at night. Grandpa was paranoid about intruders. Maybe the storm had blown it open, but a part of me, the part that still feared the darkness under my bed, screamed that something was wrong. I shut the door, fumbling with the lock until it clicked. I turned, the flashlight beam darting around the room. Dishes sat stacked in the sink. Shadows draped the room like funeral veils. The wind shrieked against the house, a high-pitched wail that made me wince. I drank a glass of water in desperate gulps, calming my nerves. Returning to my room, I locked the door, stacking a chair against it. The air was thick, heavy with an unpleasant odor, mildew and something coppery. The scent lingered despite the closed door. I ignored it, climbing back into bed and gripping the flashlight like a talisman. Just as I started to relax, I heard it. A faint scratching from beneath the bed. Slow, relentless, my pulse thundered in my ears. I sat up, clutching the light, hoping, praying it was my imagination. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a low, wet whisper, "Found you." I nearly dropped the phone. Heart in my throat, I leaned over the edge of the bed, light piercing the shadows. A pair of eyes stared back at me, red-rimmed, wide, and impossibly dark. A face followed, twisted into a grin too wide for a human mouth. The thing crawled, bone-thin limbs bending at impossible angles, nails scraping wood. I screamed, launching myself from the bed. The chair crashed to the floor as I barreled out of the room, heart pounding against my ribs. I sprinted down the hall, banging on my grandparents' door. It swung open, but the room was empty. Bed neatly made, the scent of lavender still hanging in the air. Panic gripped me. I backed away, glancing over my shoulder as the scratching sound grew closer. The storm raged outside, thunder booming. The lights flickered back on. I spun around, and the hallway was empty. Trembling, I stumbled back to the living room. My phone was dead. The only sound was the rain hammering against the windows and the faint creak of wood settling. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. And every time the storm returns, so does the scratching, closer each time. Whispers taunt me in the darkness, promising that one day soon I won't escape. Echoes in the storm, a promise, a curse, a nightmare that never ends. I never imagined I'd be one of those people with a story to tell. The kind of story that creeps into your thoughts when the lights go out, when you're alone, and when you convince yourself you're safe. I used to laugh off scary tales and urban legends, dismissing them as fiction. But after that night, I can't help but wonder how many of them are warnings in disguise. The plan was simple, a weekend getaway at my uncle's cabin deep in the woods of northern Vermont. My girlfriend, Leela, had always been a city girl, skittish around bugs, uneasy at the sight of an axe embedded in a tree stump, but she wanted to push her boundaries. I'd grown up hunting and fishing, and the idea of 2 quiet nights in the wilderness sounded like heaven. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, a single-bedroom structure with a small kitchen, a creaky pull-out couch, and an outhouse. The kind of place where cell reception was a pipe dream, and the only light at night came from oil lamps or the distant glow of lightning bugs. We arrived Friday evening, the air thick with humidity and the scent of pine. I showed Leela how to light the lamps, teased her about the outhouse, and made a roaring fire in the pit outside. We talked, laughed, and roasted marshmallows until the night swallowed the last flicker of sunset. Thunderheads rolled, and after midnight, the distant rumble carrying through the trees. Leela was asleep, and I stayed up watching the storm build. The wind howled and the cabin shuddered, but I found it comforting, nostalgic even. The storm hit hard, rain hammering the tin roof, wind shrieking like a banshee. Branches scraped the sides of the cabin, and somewhere deep in the woods, a tree cracked and fell. Leela woke with a gasp, clutching my arm. "It's just a storm," I reassured her. Then through the cascade of rain, I heard it, a voice faint and broken by the wind. "Help me." Leela's eyes widened, mirroring my own shock. We both strained to listen, the storm swallowing the sound. Another distant cry, closer this time. A man's voice, desperate. "Stay here," I told Leela, grabbing a lantern and sliding on my raincoat. She gripped my arm. "Don't go." "I'll be quick, might be someone hurt." I pushed open the door and was instantly drenched. The light from my lantern barely cut through the rain. I called out, but the only response was the storm. I stepped off the porch and moved toward the tree line, water pooling around my boots. The wind tugged at me, and every shadow seemed to twitch. "Hello, are you hurt?" Thunder crashed. A flash of lightning illuminated a figure, a man standing just beyond the tree line, soaked and shivering. "Sir," I shouted, "are you all right?" But the lightning faded, and he was gone. Rain poured down harder, and I strained to see. "Hello." Nothing. I stumbled back to the cabin, adrenaline thinning to nerves. Leela's relief was palpable when I locked the door. "There's someone out there," I said. Or there was. Leela went pale. What did he look like? I couldn't see his face. The storm raged on, and the voice didn't return. Leela eventually fell into a restless sleep. I stayed up, ears straining for anything out of place. I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I remember was the slam of the door. I bolted upright. Leela was gone. I lunged for the door, rainwater soaking my feet as I stepped out. The storm was a whisper compared to before. The forest was pitch black. I shouted Leela's name, voice breaking. Then a sound, a low, guttural whisper carried on the wind. "She's mine." Lightning burst overhead, and the man stood 10 feet away, soaked, wild-eyed, and smiling. He mouthed words I couldn't hear. Behind him, deeper in the woods, Leela stood motionless, eyes wide and unblinking. I charged, but the man grinned and stepped back into the darkness. Leela turned and walked away, her movements jerky and raw. "Leela." A cold hand gripped my shoulder, nails digging deep. I spun around, empty air. The forest swallowed her screams. The rain came down in heavy sheets, drumming against the roof of the old cabin nestled deep in the forest. It was the kind of storm that swallowed all sound, a relentless cascade that blurred the world beyond the rattling windows. The storm had arrived suddenly, and Ethan, 15 and spending his first night alone at the family's secluded vacation home, found himself both thrilled and uneasy. He had convinced his parents he was responsible enough to stay behind while they attended a distant wedding. A weekend alone, a break from the constant noise of school and family life. He'd been eager for it. But as the wind howled and the storm raged on, the cabin's cozy isolation twisted into something colder. Ethan tried to ignore the flicker of unease, focusing on the TV in the small living room. He'd set up his gaming console and lost himself in a shooter game, the digital explosions muffled beneath the storm's roar. The hours melted away, and the storm deepened, rain pelting the windows like claws scraping for entry. A sudden knock at the door jolted him. He froze, heart hammering as the game's sound effects blurred into the storm. He strained to listen, but all he heard was the rain. He swallowed hard, dismissing it as a trick of the wind. But then, another knock, deliberate and slow. Ethan's grip on the controller tightened. The door was visible from the couch, a heavy wooden barrier painted deep green. The porch light flickered, barely illuminating the narrow porch. He hesitated before standing, creeping closer. "Who's there?" he called, voice thin and unsure. Silence, then a low, slurred reply. "Car broke down, need a phone." Ethan hesitated. The nearest road was miles away, and the woods were dense and uninviting. He remembered his parents' warnings about strangers, but guilt gnawed at him. What if someone really needed help? He glanced through the peephole. The storm distorted the view, but he saw a man soaked, hair plastered to his skull, face shadowed. Ethan hesitated. "Sorry, man, I can't let you in," he called. The figure shifted. "Please, it's pouring out here." The voice was strained, desperate. "I'll call for help," Ethan offered, phone already in hand. "No, open the door." The command was sharp, cutting through the storm's howl. The man's silhouette pressed closer. Ethan backed away, heart thundering. He scrambled for his phone, but the screen flashed. No service. Panic gnawed deeper as the banging on the door intensified, each thud violent and insistent. Ethan backed into the living room, eyes darting for options. The windows rattled with the storm's fury, and the lights flickered. The pounding stopped. He dared a breath, but a faint creak from the back of the house snapped his attention away. Footsteps, soft, deliberate padding closer. Ethan's eyes widened as a figure stepped into the doorway. A man dripping rainwater, eyes cold and glinting. "Told you to open the door, kid." Ethan bolted, sprinting down the hall. He dove into a bedroom and slammed the door, locking it with trembling hands. The footsteps followed, slow and taunting. He scoured the room for a weapon, anything. He found a heavy lamp and clutched it tight. The door handle rattled, then stilled. Silence. The storm raged outside, a deafening backdrop. Ethan's knuckles turned white around the lamp. Minutes crawled by, then faintly. Tap, tap, tap. He turned, the bedroom window. A dripping hand pressed against the glass, fingers splayed. A cruel smile glimmered on the stranger's face. Ethan screamed, the lamp slipping from his grip as the window shattered. The storm swallowed his cries, the rain a curtain over a nightmare that had only just begun.